I thought degrees represented expertise. I was wrong. So, another scenario that I went through as a newer manager, and one of the first realizations I came to was when my company was looking at several projects to increase production flow throughout our facility. Now, it only makes sense that you would assume upper leadership to be the most educated, the most knowledgeable of our facility and how things work at a shop floor or warehouse level. And when I say that, not that they need to understand the intricacies of everyday processing, but understanding the basics, where we are, what production looks like right now, things of that sort, in that nature. Um, the reality is there's a bigger disconnect than you might assume. So, I was asked to be a part of a project to look at a way to increase our processing time. And that led to conversations about changes around the facility. One such change was moving certain positions and certain stations from one part of the facility to another. Now, this doesn't seem like that big a deal. There were some very concerning things that were not being taken into account. So, for example, one of the key stations or processes that was being moved is a process that the current building responsible for that process struggles with. They have a hard time doing it. They're not effective right now. So, when we would go into meetings about the progress of these changes, what surprised me and stuck out most was that no one really ever took the time to really understand, well, how are they performing these tasks right now? If the building responsible for this operation or this particular process is struggling, why would we think it wouldn't be a problem to move it to another unit where they also could be struggling? And that took me by surprise. So, in one meeting, I happened to mention the concern that this process that we're talking about moving somewhere else could actually end up delaying processing. It could actually be a bigger hindrance than we think it might be, and it may be something to look at again. And this was dismissed outright. Upper leadership did not consider this to be a possibility, that we actually had taken everything into account and that everything would be fine. It was only later on that I realized that it's not so much that they didn't hear what I was saying, but it was rejected simply because we had already made promises to customers. So no matter what my concerns may have been, we're in a time crunch. And that was a bit confusing, to be honest. Why would we tell our customers that we can produce more while simultaneously trying to move several processes and several key manufacturing positions from one side of the facility to the other without understanding the effect that it would have on our production flow? Again, me being new, being untested, assumed that a degree meant that, well, everyone should understand that we should be in a good spot because the people that know are the ones in charge. Turns out that was not the case. So, as things were getting moved, the, well, the only logical conclusion happened. Several key processes were moved and production almost came to a halt. We're in boardrooms and people are angry, getting upset, trying to figure out why did this happen or how could there be such a difficulty. Several times, the training process for these new processes in a different part of the facility has to be halted because production for the day was being stalled to such a degree that for just daily processing, it was unacceptable. My mistake of believing a degree meant they understood. And it's not so much of criticizing someone for not being aware of the intricacies of day to day processing, but more the inability to really look from a ground level and say, what is the reality on the ground right now? And how do we get to our future state? That really seemed to be an issue. It really seemed like no one was really willing to take the time and really understand where we were because, well, we're telling everyone that we can produce 10 times as much as we did last year. And when those type of promises get made before we understand the reality of what's going on in the ground, you end up running into what we ran into. Because part of what made last year's successful production year were some of the corners that were cut that shouldn't have been cut. And if you don't do a recap of last year, if you don't really look at what production truly looks like, then you're going to make decisions with bad data. And that definitely is what this appeared to be. So, what this all means is that real knowledge, what I've learned, is that it's found on the floor. Understanding how things run. Yes, you can always assume that someone in an upper level position may understand things, but the fact is, real knowledge comes from the floor. Degrees can't beat experience, but knowing that early is what's going to put you a step ahead.